My name is Jude Holloway, and I've been the lead embalmer at Riverside Memorial Chapel in Portland, Oregon for the past 11 years. In this profession, you learn to separate yourself from what you see. The body on the table isn't a person anymore. It's work that needs doing, tasks that need completing, a family that needs closure. You develop routines, protocols, ways of moving through your shift that keep the weight of it all manageable. But there are nights when those boundaries collapse, when something happens that reminds you the dead aren't always as still as they should be. I work the overnight shift by choice. The silence suits me, no families asking questions, no directors hovering, no phone calls interrupting my focus. Just me, the prep room, and whatever work came in that day. Mrs. Eleanor Kellerman arrived on a Tuesday evening around 7. Natural causes, 83 years old, memorial service scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Standard procedure, I documented everything, took photographs for our records, positioned her on the table, and began the preservation process. I'm meticulous about positioning, always have been. After I complete the arterial embalming, I set the features carefully, eyelids closed with adhesive, jaw secured with a needle injector, head centered on the block at precisely the angle the family will see during viewing. Mrs. Kellerman's head faced straight up, aligned with the overhead light. I checked it twice before moving to the cosmetic work. By 2 in the morning, I'd finished everything and moved her to cold storage to let the chemicals set properly. The prep room has 3 cameras. Insurance requirement after we had a break-in 7 years ago. 2 wide-angle views and 1 focused on the main table. The footage saves to a hard drive that loops every 2 weeks. I never look at it unless there's a problem, but that night I'd left my watch somewhere in the room and wanted to see where I'd set it down before heading home. I pulled up the footage on the monitor in my office and scrubbed through the last 4 hours. There I was at 10:15, positioning Mrs. Kellerman on the table. Her head faced directly upward, exactly as I remembered. I fast-forwarded midnight. Still the same position, 1 in the morning, unchanged. At 1:47, I paused the video. Something looked different. Mrs. Kellerman's head had turned, not much, maybe 15 degrees, but enough that she now faced the prep room door instead of the ceiling. The angle was unmistakable. I checked the timestamp. Between 1:46 and 1:48, during a 2-minute gap when I'd stepped out to retrieve supplies from the storage closet, her head had moved. I sat there staring at the monitor, my mouth dry. I replayed those 2 minutes 3 times. The camera didn't glitch. There was no blur, no distortion. 1 frame showed her facing up. The next frame, 2 minutes later, showed her turned toward the door. The rest of her body hadn't shifted at all, just the head, as if someone had gently repositioned it while I was gone. My hands felt cold. I told myself it was gas. Post-mortem gases can cause movement. I'd seen it before. Abdominal distension, limbs shifting, even vocalizations as air escaped the lungs. But this was different. The head had turned smoothly, deliberately, in a direction that didn't match any natural muscular release I'd ever witnessed, and I'd secured her jaw. That needle injector Went through the lower mandible and upper palate. There shouldn't have been any movement at all. I walked back to the prep room, 2:30 in the morning. The fluorescent lights go hummed overhead. The chemical smell was stronger now, sharper. Mrs. Kellerman remained in cold storage where I'd left her, the drawer closed and latched. I hesitated before pulling it open. The drawer slid out smooth and quiet. Mrs. Kellerman lay there, under the white sheet, exactly as I'd positioned her. I pulled the sheet back slowly, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Her head still faced the ceiling, straight up, centered perfectly on the block, the same position I'd set her in 5 hours earlier. I stepped back, looked at the prep table, then back at the body. The footage showed her head turned at 1:47. I was looking at her now at 2:30, and she faced upward again. Either the camera had somehow shown me something that didn't happen, or she'd moved twice, once toward the door while I was gone, and once back to center while she was in cold storage. I checked her jaw. The injector remained firmly in place, no displacement, no loosening. Her eyelids were still sealed. The cosmetic work hadn't smudged. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it, except for what that camera had recorded. I pulled out my phone and took a photograph, just to document what I was seeing. The flash lit up the room for a brief second, and in that moment, I thought I saw her eyes beneath the lids, not closed completely, but partially open, as if she'd been watching the ceiling. When my vision adjusted, I leaned closer. The adhesive held. The lids were shut tight, but the image stayed with me, that flash-lit glimpse of something not quite right. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I finished my paperwork, locked up the prep room, and went home at dawn. Thursday came. The service went smoothly. Mrs. Kellerman looked peaceful in her casket, her head positioned beautifully, her expression serene. The family thanked me for taking such good care of her. I smiled and nodded and said the things you say. I've worked 6 more overnight shifts since then. Each time, I avoid looking at the security footage. I complete my work, I position the deceased carefully, and I trust that they'll stay the way I leave them. But sometimes, usually around 1:47 in the morning, I'll hear the prep room door creak, even though no one else is in the building. And I'll remember Mrs. Kellerman's head turned toward that door, and the faint impression of eyes I thought I saw beneath sealed lids. I still work the night shift. The silence still suits me, but now, whenever I position a head on the block and step away to gather supplies, I find myself hesitating before I leave the room, just for a second, just long enough to make sure nothing has turned to watch me go. I never should have agreed to dig that close to the old section, but the family insisted on being near their grandmother's grave. My name is Alan Briggs. Everyone calls me Al, and I've been the head groundskeeper at Maplewood Cemetery in Charleston, South Carolina, for 22 years. I know every plot, every tree, every slope and drainage issue in these 40 acres. I know where the ground settles soft and where it holds firm. And I know which graves you don't dig near after dark, though I've never been able to explain exactly why. Plot 7. Dash G sat in the northeast corner, third row from the iron fence that separated our property from the old Methodist church next door. The family wanted their father, Mr. Eugene Hartwell, buried adjacent to his mother's plot, which meant digging within 6 feet of a grave that dated back to 1952. The marker read, Thomas Ashford, beloved husband, telegraph operator, simple granite, worn smooth by decades of Carolina weather. I started digging on a Wednesday morning in late September. The air hung thick and humid, typical for that time of year. I used the backhoe for the first 4 feet, then switched to manual work for precision. That's standard procedure. You don't want to accidentally disturb neighboring plots or damage old vaults. By noon, I'd reached 5 feet down and decided to break for lunch. That's when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, pause, tap, tap. I stopped moving. The sound came from below me, from somewhere beneath the earth between where I stood and Thomas Ashford's vault. I pressed my boot against the grave wall I'd just cut, listening. The tapping continued, deliberate, patterned, not the random percussion of roots or settling soil, but something measured and intentional. I'd served 4 years in the Navy before this job, communications specialist. They'd trained us in Morse code, though I hadn't used it in 30 years. But you don't forget certain things. The pattern coming from below wasn't random. It was coded. Tap, 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 tap. 3 quick bursts, 3 more again. SOS. My hands went cold despite the heat. I climbed out of that hole faster than I'd moved in years and stood at the edge, breathing hard. The tapping stopped. I waited. The cemetery was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic on Highway 17 and a mockingbird calling from the live oak near the office. I told myself it was nothing. Old pipes underground, maybe. Charleston has a high water table, and sometimes pressure builds in strange ways, or tree roots settling against old concrete. Reasonable explanations. I've learned in this job that most things have reasonable explanations if you look hard enough. I went back to work after lunch. By 3 in the afternoon, I'd reached the full 6 feet. The grave looked good. Clean walls, level bottom, ready for the vault that would arrive the next morning. I gathered my tools and prepared to climb out when the tapping started again. This time, it was closer, louder, coming from the wall that separated my fresh hole from Thomas Ashford's resting place. I pressed my ear against the dirt and listened. The pattern was different now, more complex. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap. I grabbed my phone and opened the Notes app, translating as I listened. The tapping spelled out letters. H-E-L-P. Then it repeated, H-E-L-P, H-E-L-P, H-E-L-P. The same word, over and over, in perfectly measured Morse code, coming from inside a grave that had been sealed for 73 years. I climbed out. My shirt was soaked through, and not from the heat. I walked directly to the office and pulled the records for Thomas Ashford. Died February 19th, 1952, age 47, occupation listed as telegraph operator for Southern Railway. Burial took place February 22nd, vault sealed and recorded, Everything standard. I called my supervisor, Bill McKenna. Told him I was hearing sounds from an old grave. He asked if I was feeling all right, if maybe the heat was getting to me. I didn't mention the Morse code. That would have sounded insane. I just said I thought we should inspect the vault before proceeding with the Hartwell burial. He said he'd come by in the morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Thomas Ashford down there in the dark, tapping out distress signals that no one had heard for 7 decades. I thought about what it would mean if someone had been buried alive, if he'd woken up in that sealed vault and spent his final hours hammering out desperate messages that went unanswered because everyone above ground thought he was already dead. But that wasn't possible. Modern embalming would prevent that. Except Thomas Ashford died in 1952. Embalming wasn't always standard practice back then, especially for quick burials. And mistakes happen. They've always happened. Medical science isn't perfect, never has been. Thursday morning, I met Bill at the cemetery at dawn. We stood at the edge of the fresh grave, and I waited for the tapping to start. Nothing. Just morning birds and distant traffic. Bill looked at me with concern. Asked if I'd been working too many hours. I shook my head, told him I was fine, told him to forget it. The vault for Eugene Hartwell arrived at 9. We lowered it into place, filled the grave, and tamped down the earth. The service took place that afternoon. Beautiful ceremony. The family seemed pleased with the location. Mrs. Hartwell mentioned how peaceful it was to have her husband resting beside his mother. I didn't hear the tapping again for 3 weeks. Then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, while trimming grass near the northeast corner, it started. Faint at first, then growing clearer, coming from Eugene Hartwell's fresh grave. The same pattern. Tap, 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 tap. S. Then the longer sequence, HELP. I dropped my trimmer and Mom walked away. I didn't run. I didn't panic. I just walked calmly to my truck, got in, and drove home. I called Bill and told him I was taking a sick day. He said that was fine, that I'd earned it. I came back the next day. The tapping had stopped. Eugene Hartwell's grave looked perfect, settling nicely, grass already starting to grow in. I resumed my normal duties, mowing, trimming, maintenance on the older sections. Professional work, routine work. But I don't dig graves anymore. I told Bill my back can't handle it, which isn't entirely a lie. At 61, manual labor takes its toll. He assigned grave digging to Marcus, our younger groundskeeper. Marcus is good at it, efficient. He's been working the northeast corner lately, preparing plots for winter burials. Yesterday, he mentioned something odd. Said he heard tapping while digging near plot 7. Dash G asked if we had pipes running under that section. I told him we didn't. Told him it was probably just settling earth. Told him not to worry about it. He'll figure it out eventually. Or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll just keep digging, keep hearing that rhythmic pattern, and eventually convince himself it's nothing. That's what most people do. They explain it away. They move on. I still work at Maplewood, still maintain these 40 acres. but I stay away from the northeast corner now, and when I pass Tom and Ashford's marker on my way to the office, I don't look down. I don't think about what might still be tapping beneath that worn granite stone. I don't think about how Morse code never forgets its rhythm, even after 70 years of darkness. I just keep walking. Every cemetery has a rule we don't talk about, but ours is simple. If you see someone at every service, sitting in the same spot, and no family claims them, don't approach them until you're certain that they're real. My name is David Martinez, and I am the funeral director at Serenity Hills Memorial Home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've been in this profession for 17 years, and I've learned that grief draws all kinds of people through our doors. Some come to mourn, some come seeking closure, and some come for reasons I still don't understand. She first appeared on a Thursday in early March. The service was for Margaret Chen, a retired school teacher with no living relatives. Small gathering, maybe 15 people, former students, colleagues, neighbors. I stood near the back of Chapel A, as I always do during viewings, available but unobtrusive. That's when I noticed her. She sat in the last row on the left side, wearing a black dress and a simple veil that covered her face. Her hands rested folded in her lap. She didn't move during the entire service, didn't sing the hymns, didn't stand for the prayers, didn't approach the casket during the final viewing. When the service ended and people filed out, I turned to adjust the guest book, and when I looked back, she was gone. I thought nothing of it. Grief is private. Some people prefer to pay respects without interaction. The following Tuesday, we held a service for Robert Vance, a veteran who'd served in Korea. Larger crowd, maybe 40 people, American Legion Honor Guard, military precision. I stood in my usual spot and scanned the chapel during the opening remarks. There she was. Back row, left side, same black dress, same veil, same perfectly still posture. This time, I watched her throughout the service. She never moved, never acknowledged the eulogies or the 21-gun salute that made everyone else flinch. When the ceremony concluded and people moved toward the reception hall, I walked directly to the back row. She was gone. The seat was empty. I checked the entrance. No one had walked past me. The third time was Friday, Harold Prescott's service. Heart attack at 59, wife and 3 daughters in attendance. I arrived early to ensure everything was arranged properly. As I entered the chapel, I saw her already seated, back row, left side. I approached slowly, deliberately, keeping my movements professional and calm. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said softly. "I'm David Martinez, the funeral director. May I ask how you knew Mr. Prescott?" She didn't respond, didn't turn her head. I moved closer, now just 5 feet away. The veil obscured her features, but I could see her hands, pale, delicate, unmoving in her lap. "Ma'am," I said again, "I don't mean to intrude, but our family has asked that I confirm all attendees." Nothing. I reached out, intending to gently touch her shoulder, and my hand passed through empty air. She vanished, not gradually, not like someone standing and walking away. She simply ceased to be there, as if she'd never existed at all. I stumbled backward. The chapel was empty except for me. The air felt wrong, too cold, too still. I left and closed the doors, my hands shaking. During the actual service 2 hours later, I stood outside. I couldn't bring myself to go back in. My assistant, Jennifer, handled the family arrangements. She asked if I was feeling all right. I told her I was fine. She appeared at 7 more services over the next 2 weeks. Always the same seat, always the same stillness. I stopped approaching her. Instead, I asked families afterward if they'd noticed a woman in black sitting in the back. Most said no. A few said yes, and when I asked if they knew her, they said they'd assumed she was someone I'd sent, a grief counselor or observer from the funeral home. I'd sent no one. I started keeping a log, documented every service she attended, looked for patterns, different ages of the deceased, different causes of death, different family sizes. The only consistency was her presence in that back row seat. On the 16th occurrence, I set up a camera, small, discreet, positioned to capture the back of the chapel. The service was for Linda Kowalski, cancer at 67. I watched the footage afterward. The woman appeared in frame at 10:43 in the morning, already seated, no entry, no approach. She was simply there. At 11:31, during the final prayer, she vanished between one frame and the next. I showed the footage to Jennifer. She watched it twice without speaking. Then she closed the laptop and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "How long has this been happening?" she asked. 3 weeks, I said. "What does she want?" "I don't know." Jennifer left early that day. The next morning, she submitted her resignation. She didn't give a reason, and I didn't ask. I understood. I consulted the chapel records going back 20 years, searched for any mention of a regular attendee, a woman who appeared at multiple services, anything that matched what I was seeing. I found one entry from 2009, a note from the previous director, Marcus Webb, written in the margin of a service report. Woman in black, back row, check with family. No follow-up, no explanation, just that single notation. I called Marcus. He'd retired to Phoenix 5 years ago. When I described what I'd been experiencing, he went quiet for a long time. "She never left," he finally said. "I thought maybe she had, after I retired. I hoped she had." "Who is she?" "I don't know. I saw her for 2 years before I couldn't take it anymore. Always the same, always watching." "Did you ever find out what she wanted?" "No, and I stopped trying. My advice? Don't approach her, don't acknowledge her, just let her sit there." "Why?" "Because the one time I touched her, my hand went cold for 3 days. I couldn't feel my fingers. And that night, I dreamed I was in a casket, staring up at chapel lights, listening to my own funeral." I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, we had a service for Daniel Ruiz, 16 years old, car accident. The chapel was packed with teenagers, all of them crying, all of them trying to understand why someone so young had to die. I stood in my usual place and looked toward the back row. She was there, but this time she'd moved. She sat in the second row now, closer to the family, still motionless, Still veiled, the girl next to her, one of Daniel's classmates, had her arm around empty space as if she thought someone was sitting there. I walked out, stood in the parking lot until the service ended. When the family asked where I'd been, I told them I'd had an emergency call. They understood. They thanked me for arranging such a beautiful ceremony. She's appeared at 4 more services since then. Each time, she sits closer to the front. Last Tuesday, during Agnes Moreno's viewing, she occupied the third row center. This coming Friday, we have a service for Thomas Bradley. I've already prepared the chapel. I've already confirmed the arrangements. I don't know where she'll sit this time, but I know she'll be there. She's always there now, moving forward row by row, service by service, as if she's slowly making her way towards something only she can see. And I know, with absolute certainty, that eventually she'll reach the first row. She'll sit directly in front of the casket, and when that happens, when she's finally close enough to whatever she's been watching all these years, something will change. I just hope I'm not there to see it. I thought I understood death until I started finding the handprints. My name is Sarah Chen, and I've worked as a mortuary assistant at County Medical Examiner's Office in Minneapolis, Minnesota for the past 6 years. It's not the kind of job most people want, but someone has to do it. Someone has to maintain the cold storage units, document the deceased, assist with autopsies, and ensure that every body is treated with dignity while it's in our care. I've always been good at separating the work from the weight of it. The dead are quiet. They don't ask questions. They don't make demands. They just wait. Our facility has 6 cold storage chambers, each holding up to 10 bodies. They're kept at 38 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to slow decomposition, but not cold enough to freeze tissue. We check them twice daily, morning and evening, logging any changes in condition or identification status. It's routine work, methodical, predictable. The handprints started appearing 3 months ago on a Monday morning in September. I opened Chamber 4 for the daily inspection and noticed marks on the inside of the door, small handprints, maybe 4 inches across, pressed against the stainless steel surface. They were fresh, the kind of condensation marks you get when warm skin touches cold metal, except clearer, more defined. 5 fingers, a palm, positioned at about 3 feet from the floor, child height. I checked the log. Chamber 4 had held 8 bodies overnight. None were children. The youngest was a 28-year-old overdose victim. We hadn't housed a minor in the facility since early July, over 8 weeks prior. I wiped the prints away with disinfectant and continued my inspection. Everything else looked normal. Temperature steady, bodies secure and properly tagged, no signs of disturbance. I noted the handprints in my report, but didn't mention them to Dr. Patel, the chief medical examiner. It seemed too small to be worth his time. The next morning, they were back. Same chamber, same door, same height. This time, there were 2 sets of prints, both small, both at child level, one slightly above the other, as if someone had pressed their hands against the door twice, reaching upward. I felt cold that had nothing to do with the chamber temperature. I photographed the prints this time before cleaning them. The image showed them clearly, perfect tiny handprints with visible finger ridges and palm creases. I checked the temperature logs. Chamber 4 had maintained 38 degrees all night. No fluctuations, no malfunctions, no reason for condensation to form in that specific pattern. I inspected every body in the chamber, checked their hands, looked for any sign that someone had moved, that somehow a mistake had been made in our records. Everything was exactly as it should be. 8 adults, no children, no explanation for those prints. Wednesday morning, 3 sets now, all at the same height. All perfectly preserved on the cold steel door. I stopped trying to rationalize it. I showed Dr. Patel the photographs. He looked at them for a long time, without speaking. "Have you checked the security footage?" he finally asked. "Not yet." "Do that. If someone's tampering with our storage units, I need to know immediately." I pulled the security recordings from the overnight hours. Our cameras cover every hallway and entrance, but they don't monitor inside the chambers themselves. The footage showed me leaving at 6:15 the previous evening and arriving at 6:45 that morning. No one else entered the facility during those hours. The building was completely empty. The chambers remained sealed. The handprints continued. Every morning, same chamber, same door, always at child height. I started arriving earlier, hoping to catch what? A child's ghost? Someone breaking into a secure medical facility just to leave handprints on a cold storage door? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. On Friday, I found something different. The handprints were there as usual, but this time there were words beneath them. Small letters, written in the condensation like someone had traced them with a fingertip. Cold. I stopped breathing, stood there staring at that single word for 30 seconds. Then I backed out of the chamber and closed the door. My hands were shaking. I called Dr. Patel at home, told him I needed to speak with him immediately. He arrived within 20 minutes. He looked at the word, looked at the handprints, then he did something I didn't expect. He pressed his own hand against the door, just above the small prints, and held it there for 5 seconds. When he pulled away, his handprint remained visible for maybe 2 seconds before fading. The small prints stayed. They didn't fade. They didn't evaporate. They remained perfectly preserved on that cold metal surface. "How long have you worked here, Sarah?" he asked quietly. 6 years. "Do you know the history of this building?" "It's been the medical examiner's office since 2005. Before that?" I shook my head. "It was a children's hospital," he said. 1922 through 1998. The morgue was in the basement. Our cold storage chambers are built on the same foundation." I felt something shift in my chest. What happened to the children's hospital? It closed due to funding issues, but before that, there was an incident in 1976, a malfunction in the morgue's refrigeration system. 3 bodies stored there, all children, were damaged by temperature fluctuations. The families sued. It was a scandal. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this building has a long history of storing the dead, and not all of them were adults." We didn't speak for a moment. The cold storage unit hummed quietly behind us. What should we do? I asked. Dr. Patel looked at me with tired eyes. Document everything. Continue your work. Treat everybody with respect, as you always have. Beyond that, I don't know what to tell you. The handprints appeared for 19 consecutive days, always the same size, always the same height, sometimes accompanied by words: cold, dark, alone. Each word felt like a small accusation, a reminder that we worked in a place where people ended up when everything else had failed them. On the 20th day, they stopped. Chamber 4's door was clean. No prints, no words, just smooth, cold steel. I checked every morning for a week. Nothing. Whatever had been reaching out, leaving those small, desperate marks, had gone quiet. I still work at the medical examiner's office, still perform my morning and evening inspections, still maintain the cold storage chambers with the same methodical care I always have. But I don't open Chamber 4 without hesitating first, just for a second, just long enough to prepare myself for what I might find. Because 3 days ago, I started finding handprints in Chamber 2. Same size, same height, but these ones are different. These ones aren't pressed against the door from the inside. They're pressed against the viewing window from the outside, as if someone small is trying to look in, trying to see who's inside, trying to count who else is there in the cold and the dark. And this morning, there were 2 sets, side by side, both at child height, both facing inward, both waiting. I haven't told Dr. Patel yet. I don't know what I'd say. How do you explain that something is moving through your facility, chamber by chamber, checking on the dead? How do you document loneliness that's lasted for decades? I just keep working, keep checking temperatures, keep treating every body with dignity, and when I close the chamber doors at the end of each shift, I try not to think about what might be standing on the other side, pressing small, cold hands against steel, waiting for someone to notice they're still there. If you ever hear someone calling your name from an empty crypt, don't answer. And if you hear breathing from a body bag, don't convince yourself it's something else. My name is Marcus Reese, and I've been a mortuary transport driver for Greenfield Memorial Services in Richmond, Virginia for 14 years. I drive bodies from hospitals to funeral homes, from homes to the morgue, from coroner's offices to crematoriums. It's quiet work. Professional, you learn not to think too hard about what's in the back of your vehicle. You focus on the road, the paperwork, the next pickup. You develop a kind of mental distance that makes it possible to do the job day after day without letting it pull you under. But there are drives that stay with you, transports that break through that distance and remind you that death isn't always as final as we'd like to believe. It happened on a Thursday evening in late October. I got the call at 4:30. Hospital pickup, single deceased, transfer to Riverside Funeral Home across town. Standard procedure. I arrived at the loading dock at 5:15. The orderlies had everything ready. Male, 62 years old, cardiac arrest, time of death logged at 11:07 that morning. 6 hours deceased, body bagged and secured on a gurney. I signed the transfer documents, loaded him into the back of the van, and secured the gurney to the floor restraints. The drive to Riverside normally takes 40 minutes, depending on traffic. I pulled out of the hospital parking lot at 5:30 and headed west on Broad Street. The sun sat low on the horizon, turning everything orange and gold. My radio played quietly, public broadcasting, classical music, nothing that required attention. I'd made this exact drive hundreds of times. I heard the first exhalation at 5:48, a soft sound, barely audible over the engine and the radio, like someone releasing a long breath. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The body bag lay still on the gurney, properly secured, nothing moving. I turned down the radio, waited, nothing. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. 3 minutes later, I heard it again, longer this time. A slow, deliberate exhalation that sounded exactly like someone breathing out through their nose. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I checked the mirror again. Still nothing visible. The bag remained flat and motionless. I know about post-mortem gases. I've been doing this job long enough to understand that bodies release air as they decompose. Lungs compress. Gas escapes. It can sound remarkably like breathing, but this body had been dead for 6 hours. Any immediate gas release would have happened long before I picked him up, and the sound was too regular, too measured, too much like conscious breathing to be random release. At 5:53, another breath, this one more pronounced. I could hear the intake now, not just the exhalation. In through the nose, out through the nose, the same rhythm you'd hear from someone sleeping peacefully in the next room. My mouth went dry. I pressed harder on the accelerator. Traffic was heavy. Riverside was still 20 minutes away. The breathing continued. Every 2 or 3 minutes. Sometimes longer intervals, sometimes shorter, but always that same deliberate pattern. Not gasping, not struggling, just quiet, steady respiration from inside a sealed body bag containing a man who'd been dead since mid-morning. I pulled over on a side street at 6:02, sat there with the engine running, trying to decide what to do. I could open the back and check, make sure the bag was properly sealed, verify that what I was hearing had a rational explanation. But something stopped me. Some instinct that said if I opened that door, if I unzipped that bag and looked inside, I would see something that couldn't be unseen. Something that would change how I understood my job and the people I transported. I pulled back onto the road, decided to just drive, just get him to Riverside, and let someone else deal with whatever was happening. The breathing grew more frequent, now every minute or so, still calm, still measured, as if whoever was in that bag had woken up and was simply lying there in the darkness, breathing quietly, waiting to arrive at their destination. At 6:13, I heard something else, a rustling sound, fabric moving, like someone shifting position inside the bag. Not violent, not panicked, just a small adjustment, the way you might move your arm or turn your head while lying in bed. I looked in the mirror, and this time I saw it. The body bag moving, a slight rise and fall in the center, right where the chest would be, rising with inhalation, falling with exhalation, perfect rhythm, unmistakable. I called the funeral home, told them I was running a few minutes behind, didn't mention why. What would I say? That my cargo was breathing, that the deceased was showing signs of life 6 hours after being pronounced dead by hospital staff. They'd think I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. The breathing continued for the rest of the drive. I counted 23 breaths between 6:15 and 6:30. By the time I pulled into Riverside's back entrance, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Two staff members met me at the loading dock. Professional, efficient. They opened the back doors and unloaded the gurney. One of them commented on how well secured everything was. I helped them wheel him inside. The breathing had stopped. The bag lay flat and still. Everything looked exactly as it should. I completed the paperwork, got their signatures, headed back to my van. I sat in the driver's seat for 5 minutes before I could make myself start the engine. My phone rang. Dispatch with another pickup. I told them I needed to finish my route first. Told them I'd take the next assignment after I dropped off my current load. But there was no current load. The van was empty. I'd already delivered him. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was still in the back, still breathing quietly in the darkness, still waiting for something I didn't understand. I've made 47 transports since that night. Different hospitals, different funeral homes, different deceased, and I haven't heard the breathing again, not once. Every drive has been silent, professional, exactly what it should be. But last Tuesday, I picked up a woman from County General. Natural causes, 76 years old, time of death 8 hours prior. I loaded her into the van, secured the gurney, and started driving. 20 minutes into the 40-minute route, I heard it, soft at first, then growing clearer, that same measured breathing, in through the nose, out through the nose, every 2 or 3 minutes. I didn't pull over this time, didn't call ahead, just drove straight to the funeral home and delivered her without stopping, completed my paperwork, moved on to the next job. Because I've realized something. This isn't about one body. This isn't about one drive. This is about all of them. Every transport I've made, every person I've carried in the back of my van. They all breathe sometimes. They all move sometimes. They all do things that the dead aren't supposed to do. I just never noticed before, never listened carefully enough, never paid attention to what was happening in those quiet moments between pickup and delivery. Now I listen. Now I watch the rearview mirror. Now I count the breaths and mark down when the bag rises and falls. I've started keeping a log. Not official, not something I show anyone else. Just my own records of what happens during these drives when no one else is watching. Yesterday, I had 4 transports. 3 of them breathed. One of them whispered something I couldn't quite make out. I still work for Greenfield Memorial Services. Still make my scheduled pickups and deliveries. Still maintain that professional distance that makes the job possible. But I drive faster now, take the most direct routes, avoid delays. Because every minute I spend with them in the back, every moment I listen to those impossible sounds, something changes, something shifts in my understanding of where the line between life and death actually falls. And I'm not sure I want to know what's on the other side. I've worked in cemeteries long enough to know that flowers don't place themselves. My name is Opal Hensley, and I've been the records clerk at Westwood Cemetery in Tacoma, Washington for 19 years. I maintain the burial records, coordinate plot sales, track maintenance schedules, and monitor the grounds through our security system. It's administrative work mostly, but I walk the property twice daily, once in the morning and once before closing. You learn the rhythms of a cemetery after 2 decades. You know which graves get regular visitors, which ones sit forgotten, and which ones hold stories that nobody wants to remember. Grave 12 B sits in the original section, near the back fence where blackberry vines press against the iron rails. The marker reads Dorothy Ashton, 1923 to 1957, beloved wife. No children listed, no additional family, just that simple epitaph carved into weathered granite. According to our records, Dorothy had been buried alone in a double plot. The second space remained empty. Her husband never joined her. No one had visited the grave in 30 years, not since I started working here. But every morning for the past 6 weeks, there were fresh flowers. Not expensive arrangements, just simple grocery store bouquets. Daisies, carnations, baby's breath. Always placed in the bronze vase mounted on the headstone. Always fresh, stems still wet, petals perfect. I noticed them during my morning walk in early November. Assumed a family member had started visiting again, though our records showed no living relatives. The next morning, new flowers. Different arrangement this time, roses and lilies. I checked the guest log at the entrance. No one had signed in. Our cemetery requires visitor registration after hours, but during daylight, anyone can enter freely. Maybe someone was coming during the day, between my morning and evening rounds. This continued for 12 consecutive days. Every morning, different flowers. Always fresh, always perfectly arranged. I started varying my arrival time, sometimes 7 in the morning, sometimes as early as 6. Didn't matter, the flowers were always there before me, as if they'd been placed in the middle of the night. On the 13th day, I stayed late, watched the security monitor from my office until 9 p.m. Grave 12 B was visible on camera 3, positioned in the northeast corner of the screen. I watched that grave for 3 hours. Nothing moved, no visitors appeared. At midnight, I went home. The next morning, fresh flowers, white roses this time. I pulled Dorothy Ashton's complete file, looked for anything unusual. She both died at 34, cause of death listed as pneumonia. Her husband, Robert Ashton, had purchased the double plot and arranged her burial. He'd paid in full, including perpetual care. Then, according to our records, he'd moved to California in 1958. No forwarding address, no additional contact. The plot's second space remained an empty, reserved but unused. Robert never returned, never called, never sent anyone to tend the grave. Dorothy had been alone there for 68 years. I decided to set up a dedicated camera, not the standard security feed, but a game camera like hunters use, motion activated, night vision, positioned directly facing grave 12 B. I installed it on Wednesday afternoon, hidden in the brush about 15 feet away. If someone was placing flowers, the camera would catch them. Thursday morning, fresh flowers. Yellow daisies. I checked the camera, scrolled through the night footage. At 3:47 a.m., the flowers appeared, not someone placing them. The flowers simply materialized in the vase between one frame and the next. 3:46, the vase was empty. 3:47, it was full. No person, no movement, no rational explanation. I watched that footage 6 times, checked the camera for malfunctions. Everything worked perfectly. The timestamp was accurate. The motion sensor functioned correctly. The image quality was clear. The flowers just appeared, as if they'd always been there, as if reality had simply adjusted itself to include them. I showed the footage to Marcus, our groundskeeper. He watched it twice without speaking. Then he asked me a question I couldn't answer. Who do you think is bringing them? No one, I said. They're just appearing. Someone's bringing them, he said quietly. Something, someone who loved her. I checked the camera every morning for the next week. Same result, 3:47 a.m. every single night. Empty vase in one frame, fresh flowers in the next. Different arrangements each time. Roses, carnations, tulips, orchids. Always beautiful. Always are perfectly fresh. Always appearing in that exact same minute. I started researching Dorothy Ashton, found her obituary in the 1957 newspaper archives. It was brief, survived by husband Robert, memorial service at Westwood Chapel, burial at Westwood Cemetery. No mention of children or other family, no detailed life story, just the basic facts of her death. But there was a second article 3 weeks later, a small piece on page 6. Robert Ashton had been arrested for public intoxication at his wife's gravesite. According to the report, he'd been found there at 3 in the morning, drunk and incoherent, placing flowers on her grave and begging her to forgive him for something the article didn't specify. The charges were dropped, no follow-up story, just that single mention. I pulled Robert's death certificate. He'd died in San Diego in 1991. Heart failure at 73. Buried there, not here, not beside Dorothy. He'd left her alone in that double plot. The second space still empty after all these years. The flowers continued appearing every morning, 3:47 a.m., same minute, every night. I stopped checking the camera after a while. I knew what I'd see. Empty vase, then full. No explanation. No logic. Just flowers appearing in the darkness for a woman who'd been dead for 68 years, placed by someone who couldn't possibly be there anymore. Last Tuesday, something changed. I did my evening walk at 5:30, same as always. When I passed grave 12 B, I noticed the bronze vase was empty. The morning flowers were gone. I checked the security footage. No one had removed them. They'd simply vanished sometime during the afternoon. The next morning, I arrived at 7, walked directly to Dorothy's grave. The vase held flowers again, but these were different. They were wilted, dead, brown petals falling away from dried stems, as if they'd been sitting there for weeks instead of hours. I checked the camera footage. The flowers had appeared at 3:47, same as always, but in the recording, they were already dead. They materialized in the vase already wilted, already dying, already past saving. I removed them, threw them away. The next morning, more dead flowers. Same time on the camera, 3:47, already brown, already finished. This has continued for 8 days now. Every morning, dead flowers, every night on the footage, appearing at 3:47, wilted and brown, and somehow sadder than empty bronze. As if whoever was bringing them, whatever was bringing them, had finally run out of whatever love or memory or guilt had kept them fresh for 6 weeks. I still maintain Dorothy's grave. Clean the marker, trim the grass, update the records, professional care, same as every plot in Westwood. But I stopped checking the camera. I know what I'll see. Dead flowers appearing in the darkness. A love that's finally run dry after 68 years of waiting. An offering that's lost its meaning. Yesterday morning, the vase was empty again. No flowers, no dead arrangement, just empty bronze reflecting the morning light. I checked the camera. For the first time in 53 days, nothing appeared at 3:47. The vase remained empty through the entire night. I don't know if they'll come back. I don't know if Robert Ashton's ghost finally stopped trying to apologize, or if Dorothy stopped accepting his offerings, or if whatever connects the dead to the living finally broke under the weight of too many years and too much silence. I just know that grave 12-B sits quiet now. No visitors, no flowers, no mysterious appearances at 3:47 in the morning. Just an empty double plot with one space filled and one space waiting for someone who's never coming back. And somehow, that's worse than the flowers ever were. I photograph every body that comes through our facility. It's standard procedure, documentation for our records, verification for families, protection against liability claims. My name is Rashid Kumar, and I've been the senior embalmer at Parkside Funeral Home in Austin, Texas for 13 years. I take pride in my work. Precise preparation, careful positioning, respectful treatment of every person who comes through our doors. I photograph them before embalming, after embalming, and finally when they're positioned in the casket. 3 photos minimum. Sometimes more if there are special requests or concerns. I've taken thousands of these photographs. I've never questioned what they show until 3 days after we buried Mr. Voss. Gerald Voss died on a Saturday morning in mid-December, 71 years old. Stroke. His daughter made the arrangements. Closed casket service, burial at Cedar Hill Cemetery. Standard requests, nothing unusual. I handled the preparation on Saturday evening, arterial embalming, feature setting, cosmetic work. Mr. Voss had been a thin man with a long face and deep-set eyes. His mouth naturally pulled downward at the corners, giving him a somewhat stern expression, even in death. I set his features carefully. Used cotton packing to fill out the cheeks slightly, applied adhesive to seal the eyelids, positioned the jaw with a needle injector through the mandible and hard palate, creating a neutral, peaceful expression. Not smiling. Deceased rarely smile, and families typically prefer a neutral, at rest appearance. I positioned his mouth in a straight line, neither upturned nor downturned, completely neutral. I checked it 3 times before taking the post embalming photograph. The photo showed exactly what I'd created: neutral expression, mouth straight, features peaceful. I filed it in his folder and moved him to the preparation room for dressing and casketing. Sunday morning, we held the service. Everything went smoothly. The daughter seemed satisfied. Monday afternoon, we buried him at Cedar Hill. I marked his file as complete and moved on to the next case. Wednesday morning, I was updating our digital filing system. We'd recently switched from physical files to cloud storage, and I was scanning old photographs and cross-referencing records. I pulled up Mr. Voss's file to verify the burial date. The folder contained 3 photos: pre-embalming, post-embalming, and in-casket. I clicked on the in-casket photo to check the image quality before archiving. Mr. Voss was smiling. Not a subtle expression, not a slight upturn of the lips that I might have missed. A full smile, corners of the mouth clearly raised, creating visible creases at the edges. The kind of smile you'd see on someone genuinely pleased about something. I stared at that photograph for 30 seconds without moving. I opened the post-embalming photo. Neutral expression, exactly as I remembered, then back to the in-casket photo. Smiling. I checked the file. Metadata. Both photos were taken within 2 hours of each other on Sunday morning. Same camera, same lighting, same subject, but completely different expressions. I called Marcus, my assistant, asked him to look at the photos without telling him what I was seeing. He pulled them up on his computer, compared them, then looked at me with confusion. "Did you reposition his mouth between these shots?" he asked. "No. I checked his features before the service. They were exactly as I'd set them, neutral, not smiling." "Then why is he smiling in the casket photo?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." We pulled the physical casket photo from the file. We still keep hard copies for 30 days before scanning. The printed photograph showed the same thing. Mr. Voss, lying in his casket, smiling peacefully as if he'd just heard good news. I compared it to my memory of Sunday morning. I'd personally verified his features before the family arrived. I'd looked into that casket and seen a neutral expression. I was certain of it, but the photograph didn't lie, or it shouldn't lie. Photographs capture what's there. They don't show alternate versions of reality. They don't change after they're taken. I checked the digital file properties. No edits, no modifications. The image had been uploaded directly from the camera on Sunday afternoon. The timestamp matched. Everything checked out, except that the photo showed something I knew I hadn't created. Thursday afternoon, I had to prepare another body for viewing. Routine work. Elderly woman, natural causes. I performed the embalming, set the features in a neutral expression, and took the post-embalming photograph. Then I dressed her, positioned her in the casket, and took the in-casket photo. I immediately reviewed both images on the camera's display screen. Post-embalming, neutral expression. In-casket, neutral expression. Both photos matched. Both showed exactly what I'd created. Relief flooded through me. Whatever had happened with Mr. Voss was an isolated incident. A strange anomaly. Maybe I'd adjusted his features without realizing it. Maybe the muscle relaxation had shifted his expression between photos. Maybe I was just tired and had misremembered. I uploaded both photos to her file and continued with the service preparations. Friday morning, I checked her file before the viewing, opened the in-casket photo. She was smiling. My hands went cold. I pulled up the post-embalming photo, neutral, then back to the in-casket photo, smiling. Same smile as Mr. Voss, same peaceful, pleased expression, as if death had somehow made them both happy, as if lying in that casket, dressed in their final clothes, positioned for eternity, had given them something to smile about. I went directly to the preparation room. The woman was still in her casket, positioned exactly as I'd left her. I looked at her face, neutral expression, mouth straight, no smile, exactly as I'd set her features. I took out my phone and photographed her myself, checked the image immediately, smiling. I looked up from the phone, looked at her actual face in the casket, neutral, looked back at my phone, smiling. I took another photo, same result, neutral in reality, smiling in the photograph, as if the camera saw something my eyes couldn't, as if her death face and her photograph face existed in two different states simultaneously. I canceled the viewing, told the family there was a preparation delay, rescheduled for Saturday, spent Friday evening resetting her features, checking and double checking every detail, took 20 photos from different angles. Every single one showed her smiling, not in the casket, in the casket. In reality, neutral. In photographs, smiling. I called the camera manufacturer, described a technical issue without mentioning the smiling. They walked me through diagnostics. The camera functioned perfectly. No lens distortion, no software glitch, no mechanical failure. I borrowed a colleague's camera, took more photos, same result. Saturday, I let the family view her. They noticed nothing unusual, thanked me for the beautiful preparation, said she looked peaceful. I smiled and nodded and said the things you say. After they left, I took one final photo, checked it immediately, smiling. I've prepared 11 bodies since then, different ages, different causes of death, different facial structures. I photograph them all in casket as procedure requires. 9 of them smile in the photographs. Not in reality. Not if you stand there looking directly at them, but in the photographs, they smile. Always the same peaceful, pleased expression, always appearing only after they're positioned in the casket, always showing something that isn't visible to the naked eye. I don't know what it means. I don't know if the camera is revealing something true about death that we can't normally see, or if something is changing them between the moment I position them and the moment the photograph develops. I don't know if they're actually smiling and I'm just unable to perceive it, or if the camera is lying to me in the most disturbing way possible. What I do know is that Mr. Voss's daughter called yesterday, asked if she could have a copy of the in-casket photo for her personal collection, said seeing her father smile in that final image brought her comfort, said she didn't remember him smiling much in life, but seeing him smile in death made her believe he'd found peace. I sent her the photo, told her I was glad it brought comfort, didn't tell her that I never made her father smile, didn't tell her that whatever expression she's seeing in that photograph, I didn't create it, didn't tell her that 9 more people have smiled for my camera since her father died, and I don't understand why or how or what it means. I just keep working, keep photographing, keep filing images that show something I can't see with my own eyes. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in the preparation room, I wonder if they're smiling for the camera or if the camera is smiling for them. Either way, I've stopped looking at the in-casket photos. I take them because procedure requires it, but I don't review them anymore. I just upload them directly to the files and move on to the next case, because some things, once you see them, you can't unsee, and I've seen enough smiles from the dead to last me the rest of my career. If you work in funeral services long enough, you learn which rooms feel right and which ones don't. My name is Diane Torrance, and I've been the funeral coordinator at Evergreen Memorial Center in Portland, Maine for 16 years. We have 14 chapels in our facility, different sizes for different services, different atmospheres for different families. I know every one of them intimately, their acoustics, their lighting, their maintenance schedules, their histories. Chapel 12 is the smallest, seats 40 people, mahogany pews, stained glass windows, excellent natural light. We use it primarily for intimate services, small families, private viewings, quiet goodbyes. I started hearing the singing on a Tuesday. In early September, I was setting up for a Thursday service, arranging flowers, positioning the guest book, testing the sound system. Standard preparation work I've done thousands of times. At exactly 4 p.m., I heard a child singing. The voice came from somewhere near the altar, high and clear, a lullaby I recognized but couldn't name. The melody was simple, repetitive, the kind of song you'd sing to put a baby to sleep. I stopped what I was doing and listened. The singing continued for maybe 20 seconds, then stopped abruptly, as if someone had closed a door or walked out of range. I checked the chapel, empty. Checked the anteroom behind the altar, empty. Checked the sound system, off. Our facility has good sound insulation between chapels. You rarely hear anything from adjacent rooms. But I checked Chapel 11 and Chapel 13 anyway. Both empty. No services scheduled. No one in the building except me and Robert, our building manager, who was working in the basement. I dismissed it. Old buildings make sounds, air through vents, settling foundations, acoustic oddities. I've heard stranger things working here. I finished the setup and left. The following Tuesday, I was back in Chapel 12 preparing for a different service. 4 p.m. again. The singing started, same voice, same lullaby, same location near the altar. This time I walked directly toward the sound. The singing didn't stop or fade. It continued at the same volume until I reached the altar, then ceased instantly. Complete silence, as if the child had seen me coming and decided to stop. I stood there for a full minute, waiting. Nothing. The chapel felt empty. Not just physically empty, but emotionally empty. None of that watched feeling you sometimes get in these spaces. Just ordinary silence and afternoon light through stained glass. It happened again the next Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that, always at 4 p.m., always the same lullaby, always stopping the moment I approached the altar or opened the chapel door. I started marking it in my schedule, 4 p.m., Chapel 12 setup, making sure I was there to hear it. Some part of me needed to confirm it was real, that I wasn't imagining or misremembering. By the fifth Tuesday, I'd learned the pattern. The singing lasted between 15 and 30 seconds. Always started at exactly 4 p.m., not 3:59 or 4:01. Always came from near the altar. Always stopped when approached or interrupted. Always the same voice. Young, maybe 5 or 6 years old, gender unclear. Always the same melody. I checked our chapel history. Chapel 12 had been in operation since we built this facility in 1998. 26 years of services. I pulled the records, looking for any children's funerals held there. Found 11. The most recent was May of the previous year. A 7-year-old boy named Timothy Marsh, car accident. Before that, a 3-month-old infant in 2019. Before that, scattered cases going back to the early 2000s. None of the services had been held on Tuesdays, none at 4 p.m., no pattern that matched what I was experiencing. I asked Robert if he'd ever heard anything unusual in Chapel 12. He looked at me strangely. Like what? He asked. Singing, a child's voice. He was quiet for a moment. When? Tuesdays, 4 o'clock. His expression changed. You hear it too. My stomach dropped. How long have you known about it? 3 years, maybe longer. I thought I was imagining things. Old building, weird acoustics, you know. Have you investigated it? I tried, never found anything. No source, no explanation. It just happens. Every Tuesday, same time. I stopped going up there during those hours. Easier that way. I felt validated and disturbed in equal measure. If Robert heard it too, it wasn't my imagination. But that also meant something was actually happening in Chapel 12. Something neither of us understood. The next Tuesday, I brought a recording device, small digital recorder, high-quality microphone. I set it up on the altar at 3:45 p.m. and left the chapel. Watched from the hallway through the small window in the door. At exactly 4 p.m., I saw nothing change, but I knew the singing had started. I could feel it somehow, even from outside the room. I waited until 4:05, retrieved the recorder, and played back the audio. Silence. Traffic sounds from outside. The building's ventilation system. My footsteps entering and exiting. But no singing. No child's voice. Nothing that matched what I'd heard standing in that exact spot. I tried again the following week with a video camera. Same result. The recording showed an empty chapel with good acoustics and afternoon light. The audio captured ambient building sounds, but no singing, no voice, no child. Whatever I was hearing, whatever Robert was hearing, didn't exist on recordings. It only existed in the moment, in the space when you were physically present to hear it, as if it required a human witness, as if it would only perform for living ears. I started researching the property. The facility sits on land that was previously owned by the Catholic diocese. Before we built here, there'd been a rectory and a small private chapel used by the diocese for overflow, services, and priest retreats. The private chapel was demolished in 1997. Our Chapel 12 occupies roughly the same footprint. I found an article from 1963 in the local newspaper archives. A fire at the old chapel, minor damage quickly contained, but a photograph showed the building's interior, pews, altar, stained glass windows. The layout matched Chapel 12 almost exactly, as if we'd unconsciously recreated something that had existed 40 years before. The article mentioned no casualties, no children, nothing that explained the singing. Last Tuesday, I stood in Chapel 12 at 3:50 p.m., positioned myself near the altar, waited. At exactly 4 p.m. the singing started. I didn't move, didn't approach, just stood there listening. The voice was so clear, so present, as if the child stood 3 feet away. I could hear breathing between phrases, could hear the slight imperfection in pitch that real children have, could feel the warmth of a living voice filling the space. "Hello," I said softly. "I can hear you." The singing stopped immediately. The chapel went silent. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Nothing. "I'm not going to hurt you," I continued. "You can keep singing if you want." Still nothing. The afternoon light through stained glass painted colored shadows across the pews. The air smelled like furniture polish and old carpet. Everything normal, everything quiet. "What's your name?" I asked. The silence lasted another 30 seconds. Then very softly, barely audible, I heard a voice, not singing this time, speaking one word. "Tuesday," my breath caught. "Your name is Tuesday?" No response, just silence again. Heavy silence, the kind that feels like someone listening, someone waiting to see what you'll do next. I've gone back every Tuesday since then. Set up chairs, arrange flowers, prepare the chapel for services. At 4 p.m., I stop what I'm doing and listen. The singing hasn't returned, not since I spoke, not since I acknowledged the voice. Chapel 12 stays quiet now during that hour. No lullabies, no children's voices, just ordinary silence. But yesterday, while preparing for a service in Chapel 11 next door, I heard something at 4 p.m. Faint, distant, coming through the wall. A child singing, same lullaby, same voice, but this time from Chapel 11's altar area, as if whatever I'd heard, whatever had been singing in Chapel 12 for years, had moved, had relocated one room over. I stood there listening, not moving, not speaking, just letting it sing. The lullaby continued for 45 seconds, longer than it had ever lasted in Chapel 12. Then it stopped naturally, as if the song had simply ended. I haven't investigated Chapel 11 yet, haven't tried to record it or speak to it or acknowledge it in any way. I'm just letting it be, letting it sing on Tuesday afternoons in whatever chapel it chooses, letting it exist in these spaces where we say goodbye to the dead, where families grieve, where children sometimes come to rest. Because I think I understand now. Isn't a haunting. This isn't a ghost trying to communicate or a soul trapped between worlds. This is just a child singing, singing because children sing, singing because it's Tuesday at 4 p.m. And that's what happens in this building during that hour. Singing because someone, somewhere, once sang this song to them, and now they sing it back into empty chapels where the living gather to mourn. I still coordinate services, still prepare chapels, still help families say their goodbyes. But on Tuesday afternoons at 4 p.m., wherever I am in the building, I stop what I'm doing and listen. Sometimes I hear the singing, sometimes I don't. Either way, I wait quietly until 4:05, then continue with my work. And if families ask why I paused, why I stood still for those few minutes, I tell them I was checking the acoustics, making sure everything sounds right, making sure the chapel is ready. They never question it. They never need to know that what I'm really checking is whether a child is still singing somewhere in these halls, still filling empty spaces with lullabies, still reminding me that not everyone who passes through these doors is ready to be silent yet. There are moments in this profession when you realize death doesn't always follow the rules we assign it. My name is James Park, and I've been the managing funeral director at Hillcrest Memorial Chapel in Burlington, Vermont, for 23 years. I've coordinated thousands of services, helped countless families through grief, and maintained professional composure through situations most people couldn't imagine. I've learned to separate emotion from duty, to provide comfort while managing logistics, to honor the dead while serving the living. But there are some things you can't separate yourself from, some things that bypass all professional distance and remind you that the boundary between life and death isn't as solid as we pretend. It happened during a Wednesday afternoon service for Arthur Brennan, 74 years old, retired accountant, died peacefully in his sleep. His wife, Patricia, requested a simple ceremony: open casket viewing, brief eulogy, burial at Greenwood Cemetery, standard arrangements. Nothing complicated. I arrived 90 minutes before the scheduled 2 p.m. service to ensure everything was ready. The viewing room looked perfect, flowers arranged properly, chairs positioned for optimal family seating. Arthur rested in his casket near the front, his hands folded, his features peaceful. We'd done good work on him. He looked natural, composed, like he might open his eyes and sit up at any moment. I checked the guest book, positioned on a small table near the entrance. Fresh pages, new pen, ready for visitors. I left the room at 12:40 p.m. to review paperwork in my office. Returned at 1:45 p.m. for final inspection before guests arrived. Everything remained exactly as I'd left it, except the guest book. Someone had signed it. The entry read, "See you soon." Clear handwriting, fresh ink, blue pen. No name above it, no date, just those 3 words centered on the first line of the otherwise empty page. I checked the funeral home. We were empty except for me and Margaret, our receptionist, who'd been at the front desk the entire time. She confirmed no one had entered the building, no early guests, no family members, no deliveries. The viewing room had been empty and locked until I'd opened it that morning. I examined the signature more carefully. The handwriting was distinctive, slightly shaky, as if written by someone with unsteady hands. The letters slanted forward, pressed firmly into the paper. The ink was definitely fresh. I could still smell it slightly. This hadn't been there at 12:40. Someone had written it between then and 1:45. I considered tearing out the page and starting with a fresh one, but something stopped me. The message wasn't threatening, not explicitly, just strange, unsettling. See you soon, as if someone was planning to attend the funeral but hadn't wanted to wait until the actual service to sign the book. Patricia and her family arrived at 1:55. I greeted them, helped them settle, answered questions about the service order. At 2 o'clock p.m., we opened the doors to guests. Approximately 30 people attended. I monitored the guest book throughout. Every visitor signed it properly, full names, brief condolences, standard entries, but that first line remained, "See you soon." No one mentioned it, no one asked about it. They just signed below it and moved on. After the service, I escorted Patricia to sign the book herself. She paused when she saw the first entry, stared at it for several seconds. "Did Arthur's brother sign this?" she asked. "I don't believe so," I said. "That entry was there before guests arrived." "The handwriting looks like Arthur's." My chest tightened. "I'm sorry? The way the letters slant, the pressure. That's how Arthur wrote everything, firm, leaning forward. He used to say his handwriting showed his personality, always moving ahead." She touched the page gently. "This looks exactly like his hand." I said nothing. What could I say? That her dead husband had apparently signed his own guest book before his funeral? That wasn't possible. I'd positioned Arthur in his casket myself that morning. His hands had been folded across his chest. He hadn't moved, couldn't move. The pen had been on the table, untouched, until guests arrived. Patricia signed below the mysterious entry and thanked me for the beautiful service. I smiled, nodded, said the appropriate things. After everyone left, I sat alone in my office and stared at that guest book for 20 minutes. I compared the handwriting to Arthur's signature on his funeral arrangements paperwork, the documents he'd pre-signed 5 years earlier, outlining his wishes for the service. The signatures matched, same slant, same pressure, same letter formation. Not identical. The guest book entry was shakier, less controlled, but unmistakably similar, as if the same person had written both, just at different stages of steadiness. I photographed the page, filed it with Arthur's paperwork, tried to convince myself there was a rational explanation. Maybe Patricia had written it earlier. Maybe she'd used Arthur's old pen, unconsciously mimicking his style. Maybe I'd missed someone entering the building. Maybe the pen had leaked slightly, creating that fresh ink appearance when the ink was actually hours old. None of those explanations felt right. The following week, I coordinated a service for Eleanor Vance, 81 years old, natural causes, small family gathering. I set up the viewing room exactly as I'd done hundreds of times before. Checked the guest book at 11 o'clock a.m., blank and ready. Left to handle other arrangements. Returned at 12:45 p.m. for final inspection. Someone had signed the book. Thank you for everything. No name, fresh ink, handwriting that matched Eleanor's signature on her prearrangement documents. I showed it to her daughter, Linda, when she arrived. Her face went pale. That's my mother's handwriting, she whispered. That's exactly how she wrote. She always thanked people. Always. This happened again with Richard Kowalski's service. Again with Dorothy Chen's memorial. Again with Father Michael Sullivan's funeral, 5 times in 3 weeks. Different deceased, different families, different services, but always the same pattern. A message in the guest book appearing when the viewing room was empty, always in handwriting that matched the deceased's signature, always brief, personal messages that sounded like something they'd say. Until we meet again. I'm at peace now. Don't cry for me. Remember the good times. See you on the other side. I started checking the room more frequently, every 30 minutes during setup. But it didn't matter. The messages appeared regardless. I'd check at noon, nothing. Check at 12:30, message already there. Fresh ink, impossible timing, as if the deceased waited for me to leave before picking up the pen. I installed a security camera pointing at the guest book table, reviewed the footage after each occurrence. The videos showed an empty room. The book remained closed. No movement, no approaching figures, no explanation. Then, between frames, sometimes across just 2 or 3 frames, spanning mere seconds, the book would be open and a message would exist on the page. I never saw the pen move, never saw a hand, never saw anything that explained how words appeared in handwriting that matched people who were lying in caskets 20 feet away. Last Friday, I coordinated a service for a man named Thomas Whitmore, 56 years old, sudden heart attack. His wife Sarah was devastated. I spent extra time with her, ensuring she felt supported through the arrangements. At 2 o'clock p.m., just before the service, I did my final check of the viewing room. The guest book had a message. I'm sorry I left so soon. I looked at Thomas in his casket, his hands folded peacefully, his face serene. Dead 3 days. Embalmed, prepared, completely still. I looked back at the message. The handwriting matched his signature on the intake forms, matched the cards he'd written to Sarah that she'd shared with me while selecting flowers. Sarah signed the book after the service. When she saw the first entry, she started crying. He always apologized when he had to leave early, she said, even from family dinners. He'd write little notes. Sorry I left so soon. That was his phrase. She kept that page, took it home with her, said it was the last thing her husband would ever write to her. I didn't tell her it was impossible. Didn't explain that dead men don't write messages. Didn't take away the comfort she found in those words. Sometimes, in this profession, you learn that truth isn't always the most important thing. Sometimes comfort matters more. But I know what I'm seeing. I know that every person who lies in a casket in our viewing room, every deceased individual I position and prepare and present to their families, writes one final message before their service, one last thought, one final goodbye, written in their own hand, in ink that shouldn't be wet, in books they can't physically reach. I still coordinate services, still prepare viewing rooms, still ensure everything is perfect for families saying their final goodbyes. But I no longer check the guest book until after guests have arrived. I let those first entries remain mysteries. Let families interpret them however they need. Let the messages exist without explanation or investigation. Because some things in this profession aren't meant to be understood. Some things are just meant to be witnessed, documented, and quietly accepted as part of the strange territory between life and death that we occupy. This morning, I have another service to prepare, another viewing room to arrange, another guest book to place on its small table near the entrance. And I already know when I return for my final inspection, there will be a message waiting. Fresh ink, familiar handwriting, last words from someone who shouldn't be able to write anymore. I'll photograph it, file it, show it to the family if they ask, and I'll accept it as just another part of this work. Another reminder that the dead don't always stay silent, even when their voices have stopped and their hands have grown cold. They just find new ways to speak, new ways to reach across that final boundary and tell us they're still there, still present, still wanting to communicate one last time before we lower them into the ground and cover them with earth. See you soon, they write. And somewhere, somehow, I believe them. I've been around death long enough to know that sealed crypts don't open from the inside. My name is Augustus Brenner. Everyone calls me Gus, and I've worked as the maintenance supervisor at Riverside Mausoleum in New Orleans, Louisiana, for 27 years. I handle structural repairs, climate control, security systems, and any issues that arise in our 400 crypt facility. It's practical work, physical work. You fix what's broken, maintain what's functional, and keep everything running smoothly. I've dealt with water damage, foundation settling, vandalism, and humidity problems. I've never dealt with anything that couldn't be explained by physics, weather, or human interference. Until 3 weeks ago. The call came from a family named Morrison. They'd come to visit their grandmother's crypt in Vault Row C, 3rd level, position 22. Mrs. Helen Morrison interred August 19 of this year. The family reported hearing sounds from inside the vault, scratching or scraping, they said. Movement. They wanted someone to investigate. I've heard this before. Families under stress, grief playing tricks with perception, acoustics in marble corridors creating odd echoes. I told them I'd check it out as a courtesy. I arrived at Vault Row C around 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. The mausoleum was quiet, climate control humming, afternoon light filtering through stained glass. Everything normal. I stood in front of Crypt 22, white marble facing, bronze nameplate, Helen Morrison, 1932 to 2025. Sealed 3 weeks earlier. Standard entombment procedure. Casket secured inside the crypt, opening sealed with a granite panel, panel secured with special adhesive compound, and stainless steel anchors. Once sealed, those crypts don't open without power tools and significant effort. I pressed my ear against the marble, listened. The mausoleum's acoustics are exceptional. Sound carries easily. If something was moving inside, I'd hear it. I stood there for 5 minutes, nothing. Just the normal sounds of the building. Climate control, distant traffic, footsteps echoing from another section where visitors walked. I reported back to the family, told them everything seemed secure, explained about acoustics and how sounds can travel through marble in unexpected ways. They seemed satisfied but uneasy, asked me to keep an eye on it. I said I would. 2 days later, another family reported the same thing. Different crypt, same row. Vault row C, second level, position 18. Mr. Robert Castellano, interred September 4th. They'd been visiting his crypt when they heard scratching, distinct sounds coming from inside. Metal on stone, they described it, like someone dragging something across the crypt's interior surface. I checked Castellano's crypt, sealed properly, no visible damage, no signs of tampering. I listened, nothing. But as I was leaving Vault Row C, I heard it myself. Faint, coming from somewhere, behind me. A scratching sound, rhythmic, deliberate, not continuous, but patterned. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Pause, scratch, scratch. I walked back down the row. The sound seemed to come from multiple locations. I stopped at Morrison's crypt, 22, third level, pressed my ear against the marble. The scratching was there, clear, unmistakable, coming from inside the sealed vault. My hands went cold. I checked the seal, intact, no cracks, no gaps. The adhesive compound had cured properly. The anchors were secure. Nothing could get in or out of that crypt without breaking the seal, and nothing inside should be moving. Mrs. Morrison had been sealed in her casket before entombment. Standard procedure. No air, no space, no possibility of internal movement. The scratching continued, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly. I stood there for another 3 minutes, silence, complete silence. I checked Castellano's crypt, same thing, scratching sounds when I first approached, then silence when I pressed my ear close, as if whatever was making the sound knew I was listening and had decided to stop. I reported this to my supervisor, Michael Thorne. He's been director of the mausoleum for 38 years, seen everything. I expected him to dismiss it. Instead, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Which row?" he asked. "Vault row C." He was quiet for a moment. "What level?" "Second and third. Multiple crypts." "How many crypts total?" "So far, 2 confirmed, maybe more. The sound seems to move." Michael stood up from his desk. "Show me." We walked to Vault Row C together. The mausoleum was empty. Late afternoon on a weekday. Few visitors. We stood in front of Morrison's crypt. I pressed my ear against the marble. Silence. We moved to Castellano's crypt. Silence. We checked every crypt in Vault Row C. 48 total across 3 levels. No scratching, no sounds, nothing. "How long did it last when you heard it?" Michael asked. 10 to 15 seconds, then it stopped. And the families? Same, brief episodes, then silence. Michael touched Morrison's marble facing gently. Vault Row C has a history, he said quietly. We don't talk about it much. What kind of history? Structural issues in the 1980s. The original sealant used on this row was defective. Several crypts failed. Had to re-entomb everyone. 38 crypts total. It was expensive, traumatic for families. We've been monitoring this row closely ever since. You think the seals are failing again? No, the seals are perfect. I inspected them myself. He paused. But during the re-entombment project in '87, workers reported something odd. Sounds from inside crypts that hadn't been opened yet. Scratching, tapping, like something was moving inside. My mouth went dry. What did they find when they opened them? Nothing unusual. Bodies properly positioned, caskets intact. No explanation for the sounds. The workers refused to finish. The project. We had to hire a different crew. Did the sounds stop after re-entombment? For a while, 38 years. Michael looked down the corridor of white marble and bronze nameplates. Until now. We set up monitoring equipment, audio recorders positioned at both ends of Vault Row C motion-activated cameras, temperature and humidity sensors, professional paranormal investigation equipment borrowed from a local research group. We documented everything, trying to find a rational explanation. The recordings captured scratching sounds at irregular intervals, always brief, always from inside sealed crypts. The sounds appeared on audio, but never corresponded with any visual movement on camera. Temperature and humidity remained constant. No environmental factors that would explain metal on stone sounds coming from inside sealed vaults. On the seventh night of monitoring, something changed. I was reviewing audio files when I noticed a pattern. The scratching wasn't random. It repeated in sequences. 3 scratches, pause, 2 scratches, pause, 4 scratches, different crypts, different times, but similar patterns, as if someone was communicating, counting, measuring time. I played the audio for Michael. He listened without speaking. Then he pulled a file from his desk drawer. Old documentation from the 1987 re-entombment project. Worker reports, maintenance logs, investigation notes. He showed me one page. A maintenance worker's handwritten report describing the scratching patterns they'd heard. The same sequences. 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 4, over and over. What does it mean? I asked. I don't know, but it's been happening for 38 years. Whatever's making those sounds, it's patient, persistent, and it's inside sealed crypts where nothing should be moving. Yesterday, I conducted a detailed inspection of every crypt in Vault Row C, used fiber optic cameras inserted through drill holes in the back panels where families can't see. The cameras revealed exactly what should be there. Caskets, properly positioned, undisturbed, no signs of movement, no evidence of anything unusual, except in 4 crypts. Morrison, Castellano, and 2 others. Inside these 4 sealed vaults, on the interior stone walls, there were scratch marks, fresh marks, deep gouges in the marble surface, parallel lines as if made by fingernails. Multiple sets, overlapping, concentrated near the sealed front panels. The marks hadn't been there during entombment. I'd watched each of these crypts being sealed. The interior walls were smooth, pristine marble, no scratches, no damage. These marks appeared after sealing. Fabris, the crypts were secured after the dead were locked inside. I sealed the drill holes, filed my report, documented the scratches with photographs and measurements, told Michael what I'd found. He added my report to a file that contains similar reports going back to 1987. Evidence of the same thing happening over and over, scratch marks appearing inside sealed crypts, sounds coming from places where sound shouldn't exist. What do we do? I asked. We maintain the facility, Michael said. We keep the crypts sealed. We monitor for structural issues. We help families when they visit. That's our job. And the scratching? That's not our job to explain. That's just something that happens here. Part of the building, part of the history, part of whatever Vault Row C has become over the years. I still work at Riverside Mausoleum, still handle maintenance and repairs, still ensure everything functions properly, but I don't work in Vault Row C anymore. I've assigned that section to other staff, told them to report any unusual sounds immediately. So far, 3 workers have heard the scratching. All 3 describe the same patterns. 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 4. This morning, a new family contacted us about a crypt they just purchased in Vault Row C, 3rd level, position 29. They wanted to know about the maintenance history, the security, the climate control. I told them everything was excellent, state of the art, perfect preservation conditions. I didn't mention the scratching, didn't explain that something in that row seems to wake up periodically, seems to count time in patterns we don't understand, seems to claw at marble walls from inside sealed crypts where nothing living should exist. Because what would I say? That 38 crypts in that row might contain something more than just bodies and caskets. That the sounds families hear aren't acoustics or imagination, but something actually moving inside sealed vaults. That the dead in Vault Row C don't rest as quietly as they should. I don't have explanations. I just have observations, measurements, and an increasing certainty that some places become something more than just buildings. Some rows of crypts become something other than simple resting places. And Vault Row C, with its perfect white marble and bronze nameplates and climate-controlled perfection, is one of those places. The scratching continues. Every few nights, different crypts, same patterns. 3, 2, 4. I've stopped trying to understand it. I just mark it in my maintenance logs, document what I hear, and move on to other sections of the mausoleum where the dead stay properly silent. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm locking up the facility, I walk past Vault Row C and I stop, just for a moment, just long enough to listen. And more often than not, I hear it. That rhythmic scratching, that patient counting, that sound of fingernails on marble coming from inside sealed crypts where nothing should be moving anymore. 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 4, like a message, like a warning, like something counting down to a moment I hope I'm not around to witness. Every cemetery has a rule we don't talk about, but ours is simple. If someone appears on the security monitors at the same time every night for more than a week, they're not alive anymore. My name is Corinne DeLuca, and I've been the night security guard at Elmwood Cemetery in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for 12 years. I work the overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., monitoring our 16-acre property through a network of 12 cameras. It's solitary work. Most nights, nothing happens. I watch empty pathways, silent monuments, and locked gates. It's predictable, safe, or it was, until 41 nights ago. He first appeared on camera 7, which covers the main entrance gates, on a Monday night at exactly 2:13 a.m. A man standing just outside the iron gates, facing inward, tall, dark coat, hands at his sides, completely still. I watched him for 3 minutes. He didn't move, didn't shift weight, just stood there staring through the gates into the cemetery. I called out on the intercom, "Sir, the cemetery is closed. You'll need to move along." He didn't react. I radioed police. At 2:47, I looked away to document the incident. When I looked back, he was gone, simply vanished between frames. He returned the next night, 2:13 a.m., same position. I went outside this time, walked directly to the gates. No one was there. Empty sidewalk, empty street. I turned and walked back to the security office, confused, checked the monitors immediately. He was still there on camera 7, still standing in the exact position I'd just confirmed was empty. I was looking at live footage of someone who didn't exist in physical space. I called my supervisor, Thomas Garrett. He came in the next night. We watched the figure appear at exactly 2:13. Walked outside together. Nothing. Empty space where the cameras showed a man standing. We checked camera 7's physical installation. Everything was secure. No explanation for why it was displaying an image that didn't correspond to reality. The figure appeared every night after that, always at 2:13 a.m., always in the same position. He stood perfectly still for exactly 34 minutes, then vanished between frames, 2:13 to 2:47, same duration every time. By the 10th night, I'd stopped going outside to check. Whatever appeared on those cameras existed only in electronic recording, not in physical reality. Or perhaps he existed in some layer of reality that cameras could see but human eyes couldn't. On the 15th night, something changed. The figure moved, just his head, turning slowly to his right, as if looking down the street. Then he returned to his original position, facing forward, staring through the gates. Movement meant intention. Movement meant awareness. This wasn't just a technical glitch. This was something present, something aware, something capable of independent action. On the 30th night, I noticed something in the background. Behind the figure across the street, there was a building, an old apartment complex. I zoomed in on the windows. 3rd floor, corner unit. The window showed a light, just a dim glow, barely visible. I checked city records. That apartment building had been demolished 6 years ago. It no longer existed, but in the camera footage, it was there, old, intact, lit from within. Camera 7 wasn't showing the present. It was showing something else, some other time, some other version of that location, where a man stood outside cemetery gates at 2:13 every morning and an apartment building still existed across the street. On the 37th night, he took a step forward, one step closer to the gates, his first real movement, his first change in position in 37 consecutive appearances. On the 38th night, another step. Now he stood within arm's reach of the iron bars. On the 39th night, he raised his right hand and placed it on the gate, gripped one of the iron bars. His hand looked solid, real. I watched the actual physical gates on camera 8. They didn't move. His hand passed through them like they weren't there. Last night, the 40th night, he pulled, his whole body engaged in the motion, pulling on that iron bar as if trying to open the locked gate. His expression changed for the first time, no longer blank, now determined, focused, almost desperate. The gate didn't move. He was pulling on a version of the gate that existed in whatever time or reality he occupied. Not our gates, not our present, but his effort was real. His desperation was visible. Tonight is the 41st night. I'm sitting in the security office writing this at 1:47 a.m., 26 minutes until he appears. I don't know what I'll see tonight. Or will he finally succeed in opening his version of those bars and step through into Elmwood Cemetery? And if he does step through on his side of reality, will he suddenly appear on our side? Will Camera 7's image and physical reality finally converge? I should call Thomas, should have witnesses for whatever happens at 2:13. But I don't want witnesses. I want to see this alone. Want to understand what happens when something that's been standing outside for 40 nights finally succeeds in coming inside. It's 2:09 now. 4 minutes. I'm watching camera 7. The gates are empty. The demolished apartment building that shouldn't be visible is glowing softly in the background. 2:12, 30 seconds. I'm watching the exact spot where he always appears, waiting for 2:13. 2:13. He's there, same position as last night, hands on the bars, but this time he's pulling harder. I can see the strain in his posture. He wants inside, needs inside, has been trying for 41 nights to open gates that won't move for him. And behind him, in that apartment window that shouldn't exist, I see something else. Someone else. A woman watching him. Her face is pressed against the glass. She's calling to him. I can see her mouth moving. He doesn't turn around. He just keeps pulling, keeps trying to open gates that lead into a cemetery where I sit watching him through cameras that show me things that aren't quite here and aren't quite gone. It's 2:20 now. He's still pulling, still trying, and I'm still watching, documenting, waiting to see if tonight is finally the night those gates open, waiting to see what happens when the watchman finally comes inside. I never should have started recording what I heard, but I didn't believe it was real until the audio proved otherwise. My name is Leonard Walsh. Everyone calls me Len, and I've been the groundskeeper at Morningside Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio for 18 years. I maintain the grounds, trim hedges, repair damaged monuments, and keep the older sections presentable. You learn every corner of the property, every stone, every tree. Section 9 is the oldest part of Morningside. Established in 1863, most of the monuments are weathered limestone and marble. The family plots are large, elaborate, surrounded by iron fencing that's mostly rusted now. Oak trees provide heavy shade. It's beautiful in a melancholy way. Peaceful, I've always enjoyed working there. That changed 5 weeks ago on a Tuesday morning in late October. I was trimming the hedge line along the eastern border of Section 9. The cemetery was empty. Midweek, mid-morning, no visitors. Just me and the distant sound of traffic on High Street. I heard my name. Len. Clear. Close. Spoken directly behind me. A voice I didn't recognize. Low, male, conversational tone. I turned immediately. No one there. The pathway behind me was empty. Trees, monuments, shadows, no person, no movement. 15 minutes later, I heard it again. Len. Same voice, same proximity. I spun around faster this time, still nothing. My heart rate increased. This was my name, spoken clearly, coming from directly behind me in an empty cemetery section. I moved to a different area, started working 50 yards away. 10 minutes passed. Then, Len, right behind me again, as if whoever was speaking followed me, waited until I was focused on work before saying my name. I left Section 9, worked in other areas the rest of the day. No more voices. Whatever it was remained in Section 9. The next morning, I returned with my phone, positioned it on a nearby monument, recording while I continued working. The voice came 3 more times. Len, 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 always from behind. When I finished my shift, I listened to the recording. I heard my name, clear, undeniable, 3 distinct occurrences. The voice was captured, real, but there was something else. Between the times I heard my name, the recording picked up whispering. Constant, low whispering, multiple voices, indistinct, murmuring beneath the ambient sound. As if Section 9 was full of quiet conversations I couldn't consciously perceive, but the microphone detected. I played the recording for Marcus, our cemetery manager. He listened without speaking. Which section? He asked. Section 9. His expression changed. That's the 3rd time. 3rd time what? 3rd groundskeeper to report hearing their name in Section 9. First was 1997. Second was 2008. Now you. My stomach tightened. What happened to them? First one quit after a week. Second one lasted 3 months, then transferred to a different cemetery. Marcus looked at me seriously. I can reassign you if you want. I didn't request a transfer. Something in me needed to understand what was happening. I went back with better recording equipment. Professional field recorder. High quality microphone. I worked Section 9 for 4 hours. The voice called my name 11 times. The recording captured every instance. I isolated the audio, cleaned it up, enhanced the frequency range. The whispers became clearer. They weren't random. They were saying names, dozens of names, overlapping, continuous, Some I recognized from monuments in Section 9, others I didn't know, and my name was among them now. Len, not calling to me, joining the chorus, becoming part of the whispered list of names that Section 9 contained. I checked the burial records. Section 9 held approximately 400 interments. I cross referenced names on monuments with names I could distinguish in the recording. They matched. Everyone buried there was speaking. Marcus listened to the enhanced audio, heard the names, heard my name among them. His face went pale. "You need to stop going there," he said. "Why?" "Because that recording means Section 9 has accepted you, has included you. You're part of its register now." "What does that mean?" "It means the cemetery thinks you belong there, not as groundskeeper, as resident." I didn't stop. I worked there every day for 2 weeks. The voice called my name 47 times. The whispers continued beneath. My name became more frequent in the chorus. Louder, more insistent. On the 14th day, something new happened. I heard my name from a different direction, not behind me. In front, I looked up, saw a woman standing 30 feet away among the monuments. She looked at me directly, opened her mouth. "Len." I blinked. She vanished, not walked away. Vanished. The recording confirmed it. Her voice saying my name, but no other sounds of presence. Just the voice and then absences. That happened twice more that day. Different figures, different locations, always saying my name, always disappearing immediately after. Section 9 was showing me what called to me, making visible what had been invisible. Yesterday, I saw 11 figures, all standing among monuments, all looking at me, all speaking my name in unison. The recording captured 11 voices layered together. Len, harmonized, synchronized. Today, I'm going back. It's 7:15 a.m. I have my equipment, my recording devices, my documentation. I don't know what I'll encounter. Marcus called this morning, told me not to go, told me the pattern is clear. The cemetery accepts someone, calls their name, includes them in its register, and then something happens, something that removes them from the living world and adds them permanently to Section 9's population. I told him I'd be careful, told him I was going anyway. Because the truth is, I don't feel afraid anymore. When I hear those whispers, when I hear my name among the dead, I feel something else. Recognition, belonging, as if Section 9 isn't claiming me, but welcoming me, as if I've always belonged there and just didn't know it yet. I'm walking through the gates now, heading toward the oldest section, toward those weathered monuments and heavy oak shade, toward the place where 400 voices whisper names endlessly, and one of those names is mine. I've started the recording. Everything will be documented. Whatever happens in Section 9 today, there will be evidence. I can hear it already. The whispers, rising, growing louder as I approach, my name among them. Len. Not behind me anymore. All around me, from every direction, from every monument, from the earth itself. And I realize now that I'm not documenting anything. I'm not investigating. I'm accepting an invitation that was extended 18 years ago when I first started working here. an invitation I've unconsciously been moving toward with every hedge I trimmed, every monument I repaired, every day I spent maintaining ground that was slowly, patiently claiming me as its own. The recording will continue, and when Marcus listens to it later, when he tries to understand what happened to his third groundskeeper, he'll hear my name. Clear, constant, permanent, not calling, joining, finally, completely, belonging to Section 9. I thought I understood the difference between what's real and what's reflected until the mirror started showing me things I couldn't see with my own eyes. My name is Yuki Tanaka, and I've been an embalmer at Cascade Funeral Home in Seattle, Washington, for 9 years. The preparation room is where I spend most of my time, a sterile, well-lit space with stainless steel tables, proper ventilation, and all the tools necessary for respectful body preparation. There's a large mirror mounted on the east wall, positioned so I can check my work from different angles without constantly moving around the table. It's a practical feature. I use it dozens of times each day without thinking about it. 2 weeks ago, that mirror stopped reflecting reality accurately. I was working on a preparation when I glanced at the mirror to check the body's facial coloring. What I saw made me stop moving. In the reflection, someone was standing in the corner of the room, behind me, to my left, a figure in dark clothing, motionless, watching me work. I spun around immediately. The corner was empty, nothing there. I looked back at the mirror. The figure remained visible in the reflection, still standing, still watching, clearly present in the mirrored version of the room, but completely absent from the actual room itself. I finished the preparation quickly, left for the day, told myself it was fatigue, eye strain, some trick of lighting. The next morning, the figure was there again. Same corner, same posture. I turned to look at the actual corner, empty. I walked toward where it appeared to stand, watching the mirror the entire time. I reached the corner. The figure was no longer visible. I was occupying its space. But the moment I stepped away, it reappeared. I took a photograph of the mirror. The photo showed the empty corner, no figure. The camera didn't see what I saw. I called my colleague, Robert Chen, asked him to look at the mirror. He described the room accurately. No figure, no person standing where I clearly saw someone. Robert couldn't see it. The figure existed only for me, only in the mirror, only visible to my eyes. This continued throughout the week. Every time I worked in the prep room, the figure was there, always the same corner, always watching, never moving closer, just standing, observing, present in reflection, but absent from reality. I started avoiding the mirror, but that created its own anxiety, knowing the figure was there even when I wasn't looking. On the 8th day, something changed. I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. The figure had moved. Its posture had shifted. Before, it had faced me directly. Now its head was turned slightly, as if looking at something else in the room. I followed the direction of its gaze. It appeared to be looking at the body on the preparation table. The figure's attention had moved from observer of me to observer of the deceased. The next preparation, the figure's head turned to watch that body too. and the best song next. Every deceased person I worked on, the mirror's figure oriented toward them, as if checking them, evaluating them, documenting their presence. I researched the building's history. Cascade Funeral Home had operated at this location since 1978. Nothing unusual in the records, no deaths in the building, no tragedies, no reason for a figure to appear in mirrors. I examined the mirror itself, checked for defects, distortions. The glass was old but well maintained, no cracks, just a standard mirror reflecting the room accurately, except for one corner that showed someone who wasn't there. On the 14th day, the figure changed position, no longer in the corner. Now it stood directly behind me, close, so close that in the mirror it appeared to be looking over my shoulder at the body on the table, observing every detail of the preparation process. I could see its face clearly now, male, middle-aged, serious expression, not threatening, just intensely focused, watching my hands as I worked, watching the deceased's face as I set features. I spoke to it. "Who are you?" No response. "Why are you here?" Still nothing. The figure maintained its position, maintained its focus. I finished that preparation. When I returned to the prep room, the figure had returned to its original corner, as if it only moved close when there was work to observe, when there was death to witness. Yesterday, I prepared a young man, motorcycle accident, difficult work. Hours into the preparation, I glanced up to check my progress. The figure stood directly beside me now, shoulder to shoulder, looking down at the body with the same focused attention I was giving it, as if we were working together. I didn't step away, just continued working, and the figure remained, two preparers working on one body, one visible, one only reflected, one living, one existing in some state I didn't understand. Today, I'm about to start a new preparation. I've been standing in the prep room for 5 minutes, looking at the mirror. The figure is in its corner, waiting. I know when I begin working, it will move closer. Will observe, and I realize now that I'm not afraid anymore. The figure doesn't threaten, doesn't interfere. It just watches, observes, pays attention to work that most people find disturbing, but that I find meaningful, sacred. Maybe the mirror isn't showing me something wrong. Maybe it's showing me something true, something that's always been there, but only became visible when the mirror decided I was ready to see it. Ready to know that this work attracts attention from places we can't normally perceive, that death has its observers, its witnesses, its silent participants who exist in reflections and nowhere else. I'm walking to the preparation table now, positioning the body, gathering my tools. In the mirror, I can see the figure moving, leaving its corner, approaching, coming to stand beside me as I begin. Two preparers, one visible, one reflected, both focused on the same task, both treating the dead with care and attention and respect, both doing work that matters, even if only one of us is acknowledged as being here at all. I glance at the mirror again. The figure is beside me now, close enough that in the reflection we almost touch, close enough that anyone looking at the mirror would think we were colleagues, partners, working together, don't. I don't know who the figure is, don't know why it watches, don't know what it represents, but I know this: the dead are never prepared alone. They're never handled without witness. There's always someone watching, always someone making sure the work is done properly, done respectfully, done with the care that death demands. And sometimes, if you look in the right mirror, at the right angle, in the right moment, you can see them standing there. You can see the watchers, the witnesses, the silent participants in every funeral home's most important work. I just happened to find the mirror that shows them. Or maybe the mirror decided to show me. Either way, I'm not alone in this room anymore. And somehow, that makes the work easier, makes the responsibility feel shared, makes the weight of preparing the dead feel less like burden and more like collaboration. In the mirror, the figure nods slightly, as if approving my work, as if saying, "Yes, continue. You're doing this correctly. I'm here. I'm watching. We're doing this together." And I continue. We continue, reflected and real, visible and invisible. Both of us preparing the dead, both of us witnesses to the moment when someone stops being a person and becomes a memory carefully preserved in preparation for goodbye. I've maintained cemetery records long enough to know that every burial leaves a trace, but there are graves in our system that shouldn't exist. My name is Morris Whitfield, and I've been the records keeper at Oakmont Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky for 26 years. I manage our burial database, track plot ownership, coordinate with funeral homes, and ensure every interment is properly documented. Every grave has a paper trail, death certificate, burial permit, plot purchase agreement, service records, everything documented, everything accounted for. That's how the system works. Grave 44 A broke that system 3 weeks ago. I was conducting our quarterly audit, cross referencing physical plots with digital records. Section 4, Row 44. Plot 44 A sat between two properly documented graves, Robert's family on the left, Martinez family on the right. The plot itself showed clear signs of occupancy. The earth was sunken about 4 inches, typical settling pattern for a burial at least 6 months old. No marker, no temporary tag, just sunken earth between two maintained family plots. I checked my tablet. Plot 44 A showed in our database as available. Never sold, never occupied, empty ground. But the physical evidence contradicted that. Something was buried there. I returned to the office, checked historical records, going back to Oakmont's establishment in 1903. Plot 44 A had never been sold, never been assigned, no burial permit, no service record, no death certificate filed, nothing. Completely blank administrative history for a plot that clearly contained remains. I contacted funeral homes, city records, anyone who might have documentation, no matches. Physically, someone was buried there. Administratively, no burial had occurred. I measured the sunken earth carefully, classic burial settlement pattern. I probed the ground gently with a metal rod. At approximately 4 feet depth, the rod met resistance. Something that felt like wood, like a casket lid. I reported my findings to Cemetery Director Patricia Lowell. She authorized a ground-penetrating radar survey, The radar imaging showed clear results. A rectangular anomaly at standard burial depth. Size and density consistent with a casket. All physical evidence pointed to a proper burial approximately 8 to 12 months prior. Patricia made a decision. We need to exhume. We need to know what's down there. The exhumation was scheduled. I arrived at 7 a.m. Excavation crew, medical examiner, police representative, all present to witness and document. At 18 inches depth, we encountered concrete, a vault, standard burial practice. The concrete was stained, weathered. We exposed the full vault lid. It was properly sealed, professional installation. Exactly what you'd expect from a legitimate burial. The crew removed the vault lid. Inside, a casket, bronze finish, moderate quality. The casket was properly positioned, professionally placed. Everything about this burial suggested careful, standard procedure, except it didn't exist in our records. They opened the casket. Inside was emptiness. No body, no remains, no indication anything had ever occupied the interior. The casket lining was pristine. The pillow showed no compression, just an empty casket, professionally buried, properly vaulted, completely unoccupied. The medical examiner examined every surface. This casket has never held remains, she said. There's no biological evidence, no decomposition markers. Then why bury an empty casket? Patricia asked. No one had an answer. We resealed the vault, backfilled the excavation. I updated our database with what we'd found. Occupied plot, no documentation, empty casket, unknown origin. That night, I researched similar cases, found scattered reports from other cemeteries, graves that appeared occupied but had no records, always isolated incidents, always unexplained, never resolved. I couldn't ignore it. The professionalism of the burial bothered me, the quality of the casket, the proper vaulting. Someone had invested time and money into burying nothing, had excavated ground we owned, installed a vault and casket, backfilled and restored the surface, all without our knowledge or permission. I installed a motion-activated camera overlooking Section 4, Row 44. The camera recorded continuously for 5 nights. No activity. On the 6th night, the camera captured something, not at the plot itself, behind it, in the tree line that borders Section 4's eastern edge. A figure standing approximately 20 yards back, visible between trees, facing toward row 44. The figure stood motionless for 3 hours, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., then vanished between frames. I enhanced the image. Male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing dark clothing, just standing, watching every night for the next week. The figure appeared. Same location, same duration, always watching row 44. Patricia reviewed the footage. Do you want to involve the police? And tell them what? Someone stands and woes at night watching an empty grave? What law has been broken? She had no response. Neither did I. Someone watching, someone waiting, someone maintaining vigil over a grave that contained nothing but an empty casket and unanswered questions. Yesterday, I found something new. The grass looked different, greener, fuller, growing more vigorously than surrounding areas. I tested the soil, Normal pH, normal moisture, nothing unusual that would explain the improved growth, but the grass over grave 44 A was thriving. This morning, I found flowers. Fresh flowers placed on the unmarked plot sometime overnight. Simple arrangement, carnations and baby's breath. No card, no identification, just flowers on a grave that officially doesn't exist, holding a body that was never buried, watched by someone who stands in trees for 3 hours every night. I don't know what grave 44 A represents. Don't know who arranged the burial or why an empty casket was professionally interred without documentation. Don't know who watches from the tree line or who brings flowers to unmarked earth. But I know this. Oakmont Cemetery contains something that shouldn't exist according to our records, something that clearly exists according to physical evidence. A grave that's both occupied and empty, a burial that occurred and didn't occur, a plot that has significance to someone, even though it contains nothing but an expensive casket and 6 feet of earth. I update the database weekly now, monitor the plot daily, check the camera footage each morning, document everything, note every flower delivery, track every appearance of the figure in the trees. Maintain meticulous records of something that has no official record, because that's my job. Records keeper, I document what exists. I maintain accurate files, even graves that shouldn't exist, even burials that didn't happen, even plots that hold nothing but questions and mystery and someone's careful, professional attention to maintaining the appearance of a proper interment. Plot 44 A remains occupied in reality and vacant in records, remains watched nightly and visited regularly, remains unexplained and carefully tended, remains a gap in our system that I cannot close, cannot resolve, cannot understand. I just document it, add notes to the file, photograph the flowers, record the watcher's nightly vigil, maintain the only official record of something that officially doesn't exist. And I wonder, not often, but sometimes, if every cemetery has plots like this, graves that exist between documentation and reality, burials that happened without happening, plots that hold something more important than remains, something that requires professional care and nightly observation and fresh flowers delivered in darkness to unmarked earth. I wonder if grave 44 A is unique, or if I'm just the first records keeper to notice what's been there all along, hiding in plain sight between properly documented family plots, waiting for someone detail-oriented enough to realize that sometimes the most important burials are the ones that leave no trace. I've burned the same piece of footage 3 times now, and it keeps coming back. My name is Thomas Sullivan, and I've been the funeral director at Whitmore Crematory and Memorial Services in Denver, Colorado for 19 years. We handle approximately 400 cremations annually, a respectful, dignified process that follows strict protocols. Every body is photographed, documented, and visually confirmed before cremation. We maintain meticulous records, including security footage of every step in the process. The footage that won't delete shows something I can't explain. It started with Mr. Gerald Hastings, 78 years old, natural causes, family requested direct cremation, no viewing, no service. We received the body from the hospital on a Wednesday morning. I performed the required identification verification, comparing the hospital wristband with our intake documentation. Everything matched. Mr. Hastings was properly identified, tagged, and transferred to cold storage to await cremation scheduled for Friday morning. Thursday afternoon, I conducted my standard pre cremation review. This involves checking all documentation, confirming identity one final time, and reviewing the security footage to verify proper handling. I pulled up Mr. Hastings' file and began watching the recorded footage. The footage was normal until camera 12, which monitors our cold storage area. At 2:47 p.m. Thursday afternoon, approximately 28 hours after intake, the footage showed Mr. Hastings' hand moving just once, fingers curling slightly as if gripping something. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. I checked Mr. Hastings physically, went to cold storage, pulled his drawer, examined his hands. They were positioned exactly as they'd been at intake, no indication of movement. The body appeared completely normal. I told myself it was a camera glitch. I continued with the cremation process. Friday morning, we performed the cremation. Everything proceeded normally. Standard procedure, case closed. Except that evening, I noticed Mr. Hastings' footage was still on the server. I opened it to check the transfer status. The footage was different. This version showed the same scene, but the hand movement was more pronounced. Not just fingers curling, the entire hand lifting slightly, unmistakably, deliberately, as if reaching for something. I checked the file properties, same timestamp, same camera, but the content had changed. I deleted the file, removed it completely from the server, confirmed deletion, cleared the trash folder, the file was gone. The next morning, it was back, same location, same name, but when I opened it, the footage showed even more movement. Now Mr. Hastings' hand was clearly raised, fingers extended, reaching upward as if trying to grasp something above him. I called our IT contractor. He examined the system, found no corruption, no malware, no reason for deleted files to restore themselves. He manually deleted the file while I watched. Confirmed deletion. It came back 6 hours later, this time showing Mr. Hastings' hand reaching up, fingers splayed wide, held in that position for 7 seconds. The movement was purposeful, controlled. I burned a DVD copy. Physical media, removed it from the server completely. The file reappeared the next day, and the footage had changed again. Now, Mr. Hastings' hand remained raised for 15 seconds. The fingers moved independently, flexing, as if testing mobility. I consulted our crematory operator, James Reyes. Showed him the footage. He watched it twice. "That body's moving," he said, "but that's not possible. Bodies don't do that. Not in cold storage, not 28 hours after death. The file keeps reappearing after I delete it, and the movement is becoming more pronounced each time." James was quiet for a moment. "You've cremated him, right?" "Yes, Friday morning, complete cremation." Then why does the footage keep coming back? I had no answer. The footage wasn't just reappearing, it was progressing, showing more movement each time, as if the recording was playing out a sequence that continued regardless of deletion. I burned a second DVD, deleted all digital copies again. It came back within 12 hours. Now, the footage showed Mr. Hastings' entire arm moving, lifting from the drawer, reaching upward, the hand opening and closing. I destroyed both DVDs, deleted every digital copy. The file returned, now showing Mr. Hastings sitting up on the drawer, his upper body rising from horizontal to vertical, his hands gripping the edge of the drawer, his head turning slowly from side to side. I haven't watched the footage in 3 days. It sits on the server, file size growing slightly each day as the movement presumably continues, extends, becomes more elaborate. I know if I open it again, I'll see something more advanced, something closer to full mobility. Yesterday, another cremation was scheduled, different deceased routine case. I performed the intake, documented everything properly. This morning, I checked the security footage. The new deceased shows no movement, completely still, but Mr. Hastings's file is still there, still on the server, still growing, still documenting movement that occurred days ago in a body that no longer exists. I've stopped trying to delete it. Instead, I've moved it to a protected folder, labeled it clearly. Hastings footage, do not delete, under investigation. Accepted that some recordings transcend normal digital storage rules. This afternoon, I need to perform a cremation. Different deceased, standard procedure. But before I process the body, I'll check the security footage and I'll watch carefully for any signs of movement, any indication that this case might become another persistent file. Because I understand now our security cameras don't just record what happens in the facility. Sometimes they record what would have happened if we'd waited, if we'd given the body more time. If we'd allowed whatever process was occurring to complete naturally instead of interrupting it with cremation. Mr. Hastings's footage shows his departure, not the departure his death certificate documents, not the departure his family understands, but the departure he was apparently attempting, sitting up, reaching, moving, transitioning from death into whatever comes next. And we interrupted that, transferred him to fire before the process completed. The footage keeps coming back because the departure isn't finished, because Mr. Hastings is still in that moment, still reaching, still attempting to complete what death initiated. The recording is his persistence, his continuation. I don't know what would happen if I let the footage play all the way through, if I watched every second, if I witnessed the complete sequence. Maybe the file would finally delete itself. Maybe it would remain forever. I just know I'm not ready to watch it, not ready to see what comes after sitting up and reaching and grasping at air, not ready to understand where Mr. Hastings thought he was going when we interrupted his transition. The file remains on the server, growing, continuing, documenting a permanent record of the departure we didn't allow, the journey we interrupted, the transition we stopped with procedural efficiency. But sometimes they're not finished. Sometimes death is just the beginning of a departure, that takes longer than the living are willing to wait. Sometimes the security footage captures what we're not supposed to see, the dead preparing to leave, reaching towards something beyond our camera's range. And sometimes those recordings persist. Refuse deletion, continue documenting, keep showing us what we interrupted. Mr. Hastings is still departing, still reaching, still trying to complete his journey, and his footage will remain on our server, growing slightly larger each day until someone finally watches the complete sequence and witnesses where he was trying to go. I just hope I'm never that curious, never that willing, never that ready to see the full departure and understand what it means when the dead refuse to stay deleted.